Dear Mr. Atheist, you might say you don't believe in God, but you act like you do.
And please bless mommy and daddy, and please bless that the atheist experience won't get any more cringy callers in the name of the son of darkness.
Hail Satan!
Oh yeah, we're talking Peterson Vs Dillahunty after this intro. Welcome back to Dear Mr. Atheist, where we answer the questions atheists are posed over and over again, as well as address other atheistic issues as we're doing here today. Jordan Peterson is a man that I have actually seen seduce a lot of the atheist community, and there are things that in the past I had seen from him and went, wow, this guy. So I want to start out by saying Jordan Peterson is not an idiot. However, Jordan Peterson has become a public figure. He is considered an intellectual, and a lot of people look to him for guidance. And it is those things that I actually do disagree with him on that are often the things that put him into the light of fame. So first of all, if you don't know who Jordan Peterson is, first of all, you're lucky. But second, he's a clinical psychologist and he actually teaches psychology at the University of Toronto. He got his degree back in 1990 and is considered a person with expertise in the field. He now tours the country and the world offering people advice for the best life. He has books that people read. But honestly, I think he's a charlatan. I think a lot of things that bring people in are these repackaging of very simple concepts, really, that he puts his more advanced psychological vocabulary on, but they boil down to really simple concepts and are often incorrect. I also disagree with his views on climate change, which he calls himself skeptical and sounds like most climate change deniers. I think his views on the attack on masculinity are pretty ridiculous. He expresses doubt that gay couples can be successful parents or that men and women can work together harmoniously. But all of that stuff I'm sure we'll cover at another time. Today I want to talk specifically about atheism. This is Dear Mr. Atheist. And I dare say not only does he miss the mark on it, the more he's asked to dive in, the further it becomes apparent that this is one of those things he has no understanding of. So to start with this, he is a Christian. That is a yes and a but.
Quick question, are you a Christian?
I suppose the most straightforward answer to that is yes, although I think it's let's leave it at yes.
He sometimes uses terms like agnostic to certain issues, but unlike myself, who is an agnostic atheist because I see no reason to believe in a God, he's agnostic on issues but still uses terms to define himself with an affirmative answer to those questions. Almost like being an agnostic theist, which is actually possible. He seems happy to entertain this idea that there are non-scientific things, that there are non-materialistic things, even though he at times seems to promote the idea of scientific literacy. I couldn't agree more with this. The first clip we're going to show from that debate, this thing he says.
If you're a serious student of religious thought and a serious philosopher, one of the things you can't claim is that whatever story the Bible is telling is a scientific theory.
What's interesting is usually when I meet people with this kind of outlook, I can have very good conversations with them because while our beliefs may differ, the basis for our skepticism and the way we think aren't necessarily far off, even if our conclusions are. But I don't think that would be the case with Peterson. Not that he's ever offered to have a conversation with me, but if I did, I don't think I could get past how many of his answers go on the spectrum from wrong to just plain out dishonest. Remember, this is the guy who also came to fame because of his defiance of a bill that would outlaw mislabeling and misgendering a person, except that it didn't do that. And yet he rode that pony and talked about how this is going to be compelled speech and you won't have a choice. And legal experts everywhere have disagreed with his characterization. But somehow his 28-year-old degree in psychology gives him more credibility than these legal analysts. And so I see the problems I have with Jordan Peterson in his fans also. They unabashedly engage in essentially Peterson apologetics. They treat him not unlike Mormons treat their prophet, where you can look back at something that he said that was obviously wrong, and you will just try and add new context and new speculation and do all of these mental gymnastics to make them okay, when in fact that's what's behind this charlatan's message. He comes bearing gifts of populism and vagueness so that he never has to feel tied down to an issue, but he does slip up when he's in front of audiences that he knows their views, and when they line up with some of his, he does tend to come out a little bit more. And those are often the remarks that are being constantly backtracked. Or it's those when he has a provocative answer to a provocative question, that he still speaks in semi-vague terms, though often they aren't as vague as his followers seem to be believing because they are willing to add an entire encyclopedia of supposed context to them. And that's why I consider the Peterson phenomenon quite religious, because there is so much interpretation. There's disagreement amongst the followers, and there's apologetics. I don't know, he just kind of ticks all boxes. And so in this debate, when it came to religion and atheism, he did get pegged down a little more, and I've already seen plenty of backtracking, but I hope if you're an atheist and you watch this, you start to consider the types of connections and patterns he uses for his atheism argument, and you should be able to see they're not very strong. Now just take those patterns and consider them in some of the arguments he's made and see if these things that you felt like were strong before aren't on similar foundations. So moving on, let's look at this clip here when Matt asks him what would be lost if religion was gone.
Oh, you'd lose art and poetry and drama and narrative and story.
Are there no godless artists and poets?
Well, there are artists and poets who think they're godless.
So is your bullshit sense going off? Because if you're an atheist, it should be right now. I am an atheist and I'm an artist for a living. And I need draw on no supernatural entity for that inspiration. I only need to look around at nature. I only need to look inward and consider my feelings and think about the best visual way to represent those emotions. Which presumably Peterson, as a psychologist, knows that emotions are things that occur in the brain. They don't require you to be hijacked by a supernatural entity. So while many make the claim that art is somehow religiously sourced or some magical thing that comes from God, I have yet to see that demonstration. And if I am wrong and they could show that evidence, I would accept it, even in defiance of my own anecdotal evidence and those things that I think I draw on now. Instead, it is merely asserted. But Jordan Peterson doesn't actually believe atheists exist. This is a version of the no true Scotsman fallacy. You might think you are, but you really aren't. He believes our actions basically betray us to a belief in God. Here's something he said not long after that last clip.
But my moral sense is utterly without any appeal to a God.
Explicitly.
Or implicitly.
Maybe. That's not so obvious.
Okay, it's really
See, because
it's
you regard Sam Harris as an implicitly valuable entity. Because otherwise you'd just throw him off the stage.
This is outrageous. His argument here is that if Matt didn't actually believe in God or act like he believed in God, he would do harm to Sam. And that's based on the idea that Matt believes Sam has implicit value. So to that first part, the implicit value, even if that was the case, that does not demonstrate that implicit value would have to come from God. The belief that other humans have implicit value can easily be justified via evolution. There are plenty of reasons that special development would select for that, and why it would actually lead to the overall better survival of the species. It's so strange that this person who so often seems so rooted in the science or claims to indicate science suggests something is completely letting go of that when it comes to evolution as it intercepts with psychology. And then to the second part about he would throw him off the stage, this isn't just that if you didn't really believe in God, you wouldn't have morals, therefore you'd be amoral. It would be that you would actually perform acts that most of us consider immoral. You would actually make the choice to do harmful things because why not? And again, Peterson should know that those kinds of people have nothing to do with being true atheists. They have to do with being psychopaths and the kinds of people who draw satisfaction from doing harm to others. I don't have the psych background that Peterson does, but somehow I'm able to identify all of these times he is ignoring that very thing he's meant to be an expert in. He seems to reject the idea that this is all from just a biological computer, and he thinks this is somewhat proven by AI's inability to match humans' magnificence and our ability to assess and think and make moral decisions. And he talks about how we've been trying to with AI for 40 years, as though that's a very significant amount of time. But he talks about how AI doesn't work because rule-based systems don't work, which he seems to be equating to what an atheist mind must work like, a rule-based only system. They start discussing chess, and he says this.
It play itself with chess, giving it no opening book, giving it no history of chess, nothing.
Well, that's my point.
It didn't give it no rules. It gave it the rules of chess and the goal of the game.
Yes, but it didn't give it rules about how to play the game.
Correct.
Right, and that's because rule-based systems about how to play a game aren't optimal.
First of all, the way he pauses and then decides to rephrase like he's conducting an orchestra, that's kind of weird. It also seemed like condescending and a little douchey. But this is actually where I don't think he went wrong or dishonest. I think this is a time he's just kind of being stupid. He says it doesn't give them rules, but it does. That's the point. It gave them the rules of chess. This is how a knight moves. This is how a queen moves. The game is over when the king is doomed. What he's saying are rules that were omitted were guidance. The way if you were to have a child and teach them chess, you'd start with those same rules. You start with the AI, and then you go, this is a method that some people use. This is a defense some people use. This is an attack some people use. I'd be way more into this metaphor if we were talking about like Yu-Gi-Oh, because I don't play chess. But it's actually the case that because of that, because the chess AI was instead allowed to experiment itself and try and see the consequences of every move it makes, that it became the best chess player in the goddamn world in hours, as opposed to people who were spending lifetimes to get nowhere near as good. And that word I used back there, that's an important one, consequences. And this is where I'm saying Jordan Peterson has no idea what he's talking about when it comes to atheism. Secular humanism is perhaps the most popular atheistic moral system. It varies completely from religious-based moral system in that it goes with two things, consequentialism and the highest consideration for humanity. Instead of being like a religious moral system, which relies on dictation and a highest consideration for either an ethereal being or something else non-human. And here again is where Dr. Peterson completely fails.
And there's not a secular humanist organization or country on the planet that has ever produced as a good thing, an intentional good thing, rapists and murderers. So,
Well, that's highly debatable. That's highly debatable.
actually,
one
it's
of the things
absolutely true because there's never been a secular humanist government on the planet.
I don't know. I think the Soviets were pretty secular.
No,
humanists.
Now, Matt gives a really strong rebuttal to this point, but you can go watch that yourself if you want. I think this was the most revealing part of the debate, and this is where I don't know how anyone can make the case that Jordan Peterson knows remotely what secular humanism is. Secular humanism equals consequentialism plus the utmost consideration for humanity. The Soviet Union and communism equals dictation and the utmost consideration for the state or the government. This is one of those things that are downright stupid that theists love to say to atheists. You know, the Nazis were atheists, totally ignoring the fact that they wore God on their uniform and Hitler referenced his Christianity as a part of his mission, or that North Korea is atheistic, once again ignoring the supernatural nature of the leadership and how the people there actually believe the leadership to be some kind of god or other ethereal beings. Remember that the president of North Korea is a dead person. It's as though they think the word secular is as far as they need to get and the humanism part doesn't matter at all. Anyone who thinks Hitler or Stalin or any of these communists were humanists is an idiot. I know at the beginning I said I don't think Jordan Peterson is an idiot, but that doesn't mean he's not capable of being an idiot, as he is shown here. Then toward the end of the discussion, he doubles down on what a true atheist would be like. That's here.
Would a genuine atheist be like?
He'd be like Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment. And I can't really come up with a better answer than that because
So he is referring to a character in a book who only pays attention to what is rational. Basically, this character decides to commit a murder because he thinks that, first of all, it would be for the greater good, figures out all the ways he could get away with it, and thinks that it all rationally lines up and that there's no God preventing him from doing this. So while you can claim that whatever system was behind this guy started with atheism, that doesn't apply to everyone. That doesn't mean that if you become an atheist, you by default would morally assess things in this same way. It's as though somebody's asked me, okay, well, to you, what's a Christian? And I describe a Mormon. And yet all of these other people are Christians without being a Mormon. And so his example of a true atheist is an amoral person, and yet all of these other atheists are capable of being moral people without being the kind of character that this amoral person was. And that character certainly wouldn't have been a secular humanist. But let's say he had. Maybe I'll grant you the argument he was a secular humanist, even though that doesn't bear out in his considerations. If all of those terrible things that then happened in the book happened in sequence afterwards, that would mean he failed at his task at assessing the consequences and figuring out what most likely would happen afterwards. And what's amazing about morality is that's actually why it's getting better. Because as society has developed, they've internally recognized that consequentialism is a better way to live. And that's why you see religious communities become better people and kinder people, better for society and better for communities when they put off taking their holy books literally and getting their morality dictated to them and the assumption that just plain words on a page have this intrinsic value they must live by. The evolution of religious morality to more positive places has been driven by secular fuel. Now, that doesn't mean I'm saying you don't actually believe in God. If you tell me you believe in something, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and say you actually do believe that thing you say you do. That's the difference between me and an asshole like you. I won't be surprised if before long Jordan Peterson says something stupid like, well, not only do atheists believe in God, they actually hate him. That age-old stupidity. However, I hope that even if you are on the Jordan Peterson never does any wrong side, at least one thing you watched here today made you think about it.
But I kind of doubt it.
Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget you can get Mr. Atheist shirts in the Teespring store. Link to that is down below. Please join our Discord, and if you have the means, please support the channel on Patreon. I know I've said this before, but I want to be able to do this as long as I can, and the financial support of those of you who can do it, that makes a huge difference, even at the $1 a month mark. But otherwise, if this is your first time here, the algorithm thinks you should watch this video. At present, my favorite video is this one. Please follow me on Twitter. I do a lot of polls there, which we discuss on my live show Sunday Mass every Sunday. But otherwise, remember, stay skeptical, my friends. Hey, check out these patrons here. Today's patron of the day is Zendrex. Hey, Zendrex, did you ever know that you're my hero? Don't forget to check out the secret link of the day.